Hot diggity dang, it is time for the Co-working Values podcast. Today in the studio is our good friend Hector, but before we get to that, there is the Unreasonable Connection going live, which is the London Coworking Assembly Forum, which is on the 24th of February, and we've already sold nearly a third of the tickets there. And if you get on the wait list, there's a link in the show notes, or if you go to the London Coworking Assembly website, there's a link there too. And tickets go on sale, for the final portion of tickets go on sale at the end of January. So we'd love to have you there. If you can't make it to London, there's lots of other juicy things like This Week in Co-working and the Co-working Values podcast to keep you connected and entertained. Let's get into the show with Hector. Hello, folks. It is the slightly world famous Co-working Values podcast, the second best co-working podcast in the world. And our guest today is Hector. Hector, for the two people that don't know you, what are you known for and what would you like to be known for?
How many guests have asked you what the number one co-working podcast is?
I can't say that, that will kill the joke. You just fluffed my line, but
Oh, I'm very curious. But that's kind of what I guess what most people know me for in co-working is just this, let's say, professional curiosity. Probably most well known for This Week in Co-working, which is according to all the AI engines, is an encyclopedia for the co-working industry. It's not how I would have called it, but it's an interesting way to think about it. I spend most of my day connecting systems and improving data and tech strategy at co-working spaces at Syncaroo. And I've been in the co-working industry since around 2013. So that's kind of who I am. If there's elements outside of that people don't know about, that's probably because I'm pretty good at keeping secrets.
I thought it was earlier than that. I thought it was the economic crash in Cyprus.
Yeah, that was in 2013, man.
Was it? I thought it was earlier. Anyway, sorry, two lads talking on a podcast. So what I want to get into today, because we're going to put a link to Rosie from Cobot's newsletter in the show notes, and that kind of prompted us to start chatting here. But before we came on, you said how people are finding co-working spaces. And so is it SEO? Is it AI agents? Is it asking their mate? What's going on there?
Great question. So yeah, in the article or before the article, Rosie asked kind of what were the major three shifts I was seeing around not co-working as an industry, but how people are using co-working space. And discoverability and how people are finding space is the third item I mentioned. Do you mind if I jump through the first two just because it gives a little bit more background?
Go for it.
Before
the more
discoverability.
You talk, the more value it will be.
I was going to say the same thing to you, but all right, since you gave me a little bit of a soapbox, I'll take it. So the first thing that we're seeing, and this is kind of still building on from the days of the pandemic, is this mental mind shift between of people who work at desk-based work or do desk-based work from the office versus home, and this idea of an ecosystem of workspaces, where teams and individuals are increasingly splitting their times across different types of workspaces, whether it's a traditional hybrid approach where there's most of the time in the office, sometime at home, sometimes at a co-working space. We're also seeing, pop-ins for working sessions, fractional officing, this idea of people popping into different workspaces, not only based on where it is, but on the task they're trying to achieve, as well as what else is happening outside of their work life. So this idea that you don't have to be in a specific physical place to achieve a task, but there are physical spaces that make certain tasks easier to achieve, is this first idea that we're seeing this big shift in how people think about where I work. The next piece is who's actually paying for this space. Pre-COVID, your employer paid for an office, you worked from that office. Some employers gave a co-working stipend or some sort of kickback, or gave you a company card to pay for a co-working space. What we're seeing now is increasingly, as organizations become more hybrid friendly or more workspace ecosystem enabled, they are figuring out ways to centralize the billing, to centralize the accounting, to centralize the reporting, to figure out how all of this reflects on their P&Ls. So when they go to the end of the year, they know that they're not just giving away additional pay to employees that could negatively impact them when it comes to things like taxes, etc. So how people pay for their co-working spaces is changing how they interact with co-working spaces. Most people are doing it through corporate apps or allowances or some sort of card, as I said, and that's changing how they interact with spaces. They're leaning towards the ones that are easier to pay, easier to interact with. They don't have to then do a 3-step process of uploading invoices and sending it to billing or sending it to accounting to get reimbursed off. Like, the easier it is to access the space from a billing perspective, as well as, actually getting into the space and getting your office and making sure it's not double booked and all that stuff, is changing how people interact with space. So one, ecosystem will work. Second, who's paying? And that brings us to the final idea that I discussed with Rosie, and that was how people find space built on those two is also changing. So yes, some people would go to search engines and say co-working space near me and look at the 10 options that come up on Google Maps and then go to their website and then try and book. That is one route. Others is kind of these booking apps. Where am I? Where am I going to be? Find me a space. Almost always that means that they're looking at pictures of empty desks in almost always pretty offices, almost always well positioned, but always kind of positioned on a map, right? That's what a lot of people use to find co-working spaces. Now, with this growing popularity of, OpenAI, Claude, Perplexity, Comet browser, all these new ways of searching, we're starting to see search traffic hit co-working spaces for very, very long tail prompts. Examples like, I need a workspace with a podcast studio near Abby's soccer training on Tuesday afternoons that I can book on a per day basis. That is not going to produce a great search result, but in the right AI agent or the right AI interface, that is going to return a very contextual set of results. And there are a few other examples and prompts that you can think about that really bring together those two pieces that I mentioned a bit earlier. Another example that we saw is, I need somewhere quiet to get some deep work done that has great coffee, isn't too busy on Wednesday mornings, and is within 5 minutes walk of Tottenham Court Station, right? That is something perfectly logical that someone would search for, and now they have the technology in order to do that. And so we're starting to see the shift of people asking systems like that, but I'm a big believer that over the next sort of 18 to 24 months, systems themselves will start looking for space in the same way. They know what your calendar is, they know where you have to be, they know the commuting times, they know ratings from different systems. They will be able to build a very context-first search index, and that's how people are going to start interacting more with spaces that match different criteria for different tasks.
So if I was, say, like, I still got the bathtub to boardroom wrist strap around, but if I was in bathtub to boardroom, and which is a co-working space that me and Hector were in at different times in London, and I wanted to show up in that AI search, is that something I would put in Google Maps? Is it something I put in something on my website? Is it would it in a blog post consistently? Like, how would I engineer my communication to?
Great question.
So at least get in there.
There's fundamental building blocks, right? And the fundamental building blocks are the same as for SEO. You want to have well marked up website. You want to be able to surface the things that differentiate your space. But the beauty that of the way AI searches compared to the way a search engine searches is it merges content from various sources. So you want to make sure you're engaging in conversations on things like Reddit, on other mediums. You're involved in podcasts. You're doing videos. You're putting out content that explains more about the space, but you're also helping elevate content created in your space. So you're whether it's reviews or events happening in your space or successes in your space, posting that in a way that it ties back to what is happening within your walls is a good strategy. Now, anyone who tells you they have the silver bullet for this is lying. Nobody knows exactly how to optimize towards it, but good fundamentals is what we are recommending right now.
I've just said for years, like put stuff on your website, and that's kind of all you need to do. I met so many people, and at times have been one of these people, definitely, where I just try to write an article that is made for SEO, and people that I've been following talking about this, like, Marcus Sheridan's a good example with They Ask You Answer, is if you've been putting stuff on your website that answers people's questions and sounds human for a long, long time, you'll be more likely to show up in those kind of things. We drifted a little bit into AI there, Hector.
Yes, I mean, that's how everything does these days.
What is, so I don't know how AI works for me, but like if I'm running a co-working space that I own, what am I doing with AI? Because it seems like everyone's shouting about AI, and 2026 is the year of AI, but what is it? It's worth, while we're doing this, folks, it's worth going and looking up Anthony Slumbers on LinkedIn and how he annihilates people talking about AI, even though he knows more about AI than most people. That's an interesting thing. But what's a useful kind of how to use AI in your co-working space without falling over?
I mean, that's a great question. And a lot of the attention in co-working has been around generative AI, using it to produce more marketing, more content more quickly. And there's, good and bad around that. I'm not going to dive too deeply into that. There is also, a growing number of customer-facing or member-facing AI agents that are designed to speed up the response times, close deals faster, etc. Once again, I've done a whole deep dive on that. You can find it on This Week in Co-working under Undercurrents. But what I'm seeing, especially from some of the most forward-looking or future-looking operators, is really getting the business into a shape that it's ready for operational AI. And what I mean by operational AI, AI that you use internally for your team to get either better results, produce better outputs, or even just get better nudging about how to improve the hospitality of a space. And there's a lot that you can kind of look at, how you build the right data strategy, how you think about context mapping, how you put together integrations between systems so you have a reliable data center of truth. There's a lot that can be said there. But what I'm most excited about is actually looking at the actual implementations of if this is done right. So being told that, hey, this is Bernie's 200th day pass, right? He's coming in tomorrow for his 200th day pass. There is so much that you can do with the right hospitality hat on to make that a memorable, marketable, great experience. But that information is normally stuck deep inside some database or multiple databases somewhere. So having an AI implementation that can track these and create these human prompts for moments of delight is a great use case of AI internally. Now, that's obviously a slightly larger, is best practice in a slightly larger company, normally 5+ locations. That makes the most sense. But we're also seeing, emerging opportunities that are outside of our industry, outside of our tech stacks. I wrote an article earlier this week about how vibe coding will probably change not only co-working hiring, but the way co-working spaces think about technology. We're seeing it in so many other verticals or industries where entire software as a service solutions are being replaced by single task applications vibe coded within an organization.
Before you go on, I read about vibe coding, and I'm just going to have to stick with what I'm doing for now before I go off on another tangent. But I've seen examples of that too, which I'm not going to start saying because I'll go down a rabbit hole. What is vibe coding like
Got it.
to an eighth grader?
So eighth grader. So instead of coding, essentially is you write a very structured instruction, and a computer takes that instruction and does an action. So I draw a line on a piece of paper, and the computer knows to follow that line. Whereas vibe coding is, I don't have to know the language that the computer needs to know. I can tell it, I need this outcome, and I'm not really fussed about how you do it, which language you use, which platform, which infrastructure you use, but I want the outcome. So an example I put in the piece is being able to do a quick analysis of based on an Excel sheet. I want to be able to quickly see who are the oldest accounts in this Excel sheet. I want to create a onboarding checklist that allows me to make sure that everyone is onboarded correctly and sends it to me an email when it's complete. You can tell a lot of these vibe coding systems to do that without knowing how it's done. And that is where the opportunity lies, is anyone who can understand the problem set, i.e. every time a customer comes in, we have to do these 10 things, can now start building solutions to that. And there's this idea around what is called citizen developers. So before you needed to build code, you had to go to the development team, the engineering team, or the outsourced agency, give them instructions, they give you a scope, it's a whole process. What is happening now is the most forward-looking companies are looking at how they can enable every one of their employees to at least build the prototype using vibe coding. So you want your inventory check-in system to look like this, go into a Lovable or a Cursor or whatever it is, generate the first version, and then we take that to the dev team and then they build. So that's kind of where we are right now. We're not production ready. A lot of the vibe coding systems expose around 15 different risks to your data, to your organization, etc., which you have to think about. But the reason why I started talking about it now is just like millennials came into co-working or came into the working industry, just like millennials came into the workplace knowing how the internet worked, and then Gen Z came in knowing how mobile works because they grew up with it. Generation Alpha is going to come into the industry with AI native skills. And unless you have thought about this or started thinking about this and protecting your data and building the infrastructure to allow them to do this, the best people are going to go to where they can do the most work, the most effortlessly using AI tools. So a lot of people have to start thinking about, especially with younger workforces, how are you going to start allowing your employees or your teams to start leveraging technology like vibe coding to grow your business?
I'm so glad I asked. It was about 6 months ago. We did a lot of talking about AI in the London Coworking Assembly, and it is amazing how few people are utilizing it operationally. And I'm sure that's changed by now, but I just assume that a lot of people will be employing it more and more. I mean, I've had the luxury of like hanging around Kofi since it all started, but the a lot of those things there, I used that Gemini Enterprise thing I sent you, and it surfaces so much from my Google Drive, which is now 15 years old. Like, where did I talk about this? And it will go back, oh, you and Hector had a conversation about co-working space software in 2014 or whenever it was. It's like very easy to find stuff. And this isn't vibe coding, but it is significantly better at searching Google Drive than Google Drive is at searching Google Drive. And the context is I just write what I'm looking for, and it brings up all these instances. So I'm not sure how that applies to what you just said, but it is saving me so much time and sparking so many more ideas.
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of like enterprise or tool specific AI, right? Every single tool will have AI built into it, just because of those efficiencies you mentioned, right? It's much better at extracting context, extracting content, but also combining large data sets, right? Because that's what LLMs do at the end of the day. And so we're going to see that a lot. But where it gets really, really interesting is you're still going to have multiple systems. And those multiple systems will eventually become essentially APIs to each other. So if you're using HubSpot and an inventory system and a door access system and a Wi-Fi system, and you want to create a report using data from all four of those systems, it's a pain in the butt to do it right now, right? It's doable, but it's a pain in the butt. And increasingly, as you start exporting the data sets and dropping them into a Google Drive or Gemini or something like that, and it starts learning, we're eventually going to get to a place where that export step is no longer necessary. The agent or the agent orchestration network will know what access everyone has. It will be able to go and look up those queries because it knows enough about each interface. It will be able to speak. Let's say you've got your own agent. You'll be able to speak to Gemini, get the result from Gemini, get that back into its agent, pass that back to maybe a double check agent. So there's a lot that can be done. And this does sound very hypothetical right now because there's very few companies who have successfully done this at full scale. But we're at the baby steps now. We're at that stage now where the first mobile browser was introduced and people were like, oh, what else can we do with our phones? We're at that stage now of AI.
I remember in our networking group, there was people who say, you need to have, I've got a 90% of the room were chuffed they had a website. And then other people, the web developers were saying, does it work on mobile? That was their thing. Does it work on mobile? Why do I need it to work on mobile? Mate, you need it to work on mobile. And like 3 people in the room had an iPhone that only just worked on mobile. And I remember a guy put it so clearly, I can't remember his name, but he said, someone was like, oh, well, you always say I need a mobile website. It goes, if I have my laptop on the table, coffee table, and I'm lying on the sofa with my phone and I want to order a pizza, I will order the pizza that works from the place that works on my mobile phone because I just can't be bothered to reach over and open the laptop. And that was his, and everyone, oh no, I get it. But is there anything else you want to add to that? And also, can you kind of wrap up with, I think people hear these things a lot from people like us. So it's like, oh, HubSpot does all this. And then, one person businesses or small teams get involved in trying to learn HubSpot and hemorrhage a lot of energy. Like what stage of my business or do I think about what we've just been talking about?
I mean, it's an interesting one, right? If you're at the one person company prior to you, literally most of my life has been in that box. It's a different subset. You have to basically figure out how you can most efficiently make the best use of your time. So think about that from like the repetitive, like what is the frog you would want to eat first? Or what is the thing that you have to do every day that puts that pain in your stomach automate that first, right? That's where you start looking at this whole juggernaut. When you're at that kind of scalability becomes a problem size, 5+ locations, multiple team members per location, multiple systems per team member, that's when you really want to start looking at the orchestration of your, what we call an operating stack. How do you put those pieces together? How do you think about what comes in the rest of 2026, but also in 2020, in 2030, 2031? That's when you have to think a little bit more outside of what's happening day to day. But there is the trap, right? We saw this in the early days of co-working. Every co-working space built their own software. Right now we're at that phase where every co-working space and many co-working spaces are building their own AI agents. They're building their own database infrastructure. And they're not bringing in experts to guide them yet. We're still in that very early stage of maturity. That is the next wave that's coming, is people will turn to the experts and realize that they don't need to know everything about HubSpot or their inventory system or their website or any of these pieces. They need good people in place so that they can get the outcomes, not the technology. I think that is how I'll probably end out this episode, is just really focusing on this is the biggest shift to impact technology in probably 30 years. And that's going from buying CDs to buying cloud solutions, to buying seats in cloud solutions, to now paying for outcomes. That is the next big shift that we're seeing at the largest levels, is people no longer want to pay for access to a system, but pay for the value that that system creates.
Beautiful. And also, like, not that I've ever done this, but, you know, it's tempting to solve problems you don't have yet. Like, you see, I can do this I can launch aeroplanes in AI. It's like, you know, you're a blogger in a 3-site co-working company in Birmingham. Stick to what you're doing. Go on.
Yeah, I was going to say that, I mean, that I completely agree with that, but I do think that trying to solve something that's inherently in your business first is probably the hardest way to learn vibe coding, AI tooling, etc. The example from my life is I could have tried to think about how do we rebuild This Week in Co-working using vibe coding. But This Week in Co-working has thousands of articles connecting tens of thousands of leaders across multitudes more brands, right? Rebuilding that would have been such a lift and terrifying thing to do, that instead, a week before International Co-working Day last year, I was like, what happens if we just built a game? What if we built a community building online game that let people search for co-working words? It was adjacent enough that I got to play with it. If I had to burn it and no one knew about it, that's fine. If I could launch it and it wasn't that great, nobody lost revenue, nobody lost sleep, no one got hurt. So it allowed me to really dig in and spend this 4-ish months since then really building out my team of AI agents that helped me code. But I wouldn't have been able to do that if I tried to tackle the biggest tech problem in front of me. So I say that just to kind of counterposition what you were saying earlier. Yeah, don't go and do something completely separate, like building a credit card company if you're blogging, but maybe build something that's adjacent to you so you can learn the tooling, learn how it works, and ultimately throw it away if it sucks.
Beautiful. I appreciate that example there, because many times I've not followed that advice. So you mentioned This Week in Co-working. Gee, where can we find that, Hector?
So you can go to thisweekincoworking.com. There is an entire encyclopedia there for you to explore, enjoy, and take with you wherever you go.
Can you spell out what people will find in there? Because it is saying it's a co-working newsletter is really underselling it, because there's, you know, me and you and lots of other people who make content for the co-working industry, but this is very specific.
Yeah, so I mean, it was really designed around elevating more voices and ideas across the co-working world. So what you'll see when you first get there is the latest 4 newsletters. Every week, every Thursday at 6 a.m., we send at 6 a.m. Eastern, we send out a newsletter of these are the things that people and companies did across the co-working world. That's sectioned into categories like news and views, data drops, market moves, technology updates, celebrations, and a few others. And that's kind of the first thing you'll see. If you scroll a little bit past that, you'll see the game that we created. They're called Co-working Words. Some of the latest scores from people across the co-working world competing with each other. Nexus just won the first annual team challenge there, so congrats to them. And then scroll a little bit further, that you're going to get to our undercurrents. Our undercurrents are our deep dive reports where we interview 5 to 10 execs across the co-working world on some of the trends that I feel will drastically change or destroy some of the ways we work. So that's what you'll see next. After that, you'll see one of our shows, which is the Behind the News show. This is exclusive sit-downs with execs across the industry who were mentioned in the newsletter. And then somewhere in between all of those, you'll see this newest section called Co-working Leaders. And these are auto-updating contextual pages about the people in co-working. So obviously, Bernie, you have one. I've got one. Anyone who's been mentioned over 20-ish times in the newsletter automatically gets one. And they are tied to showing off all the times you've been mentioned in the newsletter, the things you do, where else you can be found on the internet. And those are all designed around giving the search engines of the future more context about who is actually doing the co-working stuff around the world.
Is that all? Jeez.
That's it. That's a very, very small project.
It's like Netflix for co-working. But that's great, because there is, this is not a paid promotion, folks. There's a lot of valuable information in there. I've been reading that every week since it came out, and it's actually easier to read that newsletter than it is to go and Google stuff about what's going on in the industry.
I appreciate that. That's the goal, and it's all free. That's the beautiful thing about it. We have got a patron status for brands who want to support our work, but everything on This Week in Co-working is designed to be accessible, to be free, and to oftentimes be in many different types of mediums or formats, so that whether you're dialing in from dial-up internet or are sitting in the world's fastest internet hub, you can access this information and use it to build better, more resilient co-working businesses.
I'm so jealous. Anyway, did I say that out loud? So folks, that is Hector, and we're going to, I'm so excited now. Don't know how to close the show. So link in the show notes to everything we spoke about, including the undercurrents thing about the AI agents there. That's a very good, just for context, years ago, Hector set up my website, and it's the only website I've ever owned that hasn't broken. So, it's very trusted tech advice. What are we doing? So link in the show notes to all of that. There's a link to European Co-working Day, which is in May. There's a link to the Workspace Design Show, which is in London at the end of February. We're doing two 2-hour workshops on each day there at the Workspace Design Show. We have Unreasonable Connection Live, which is the London Coworking Forum. We've already sold. It's really annoying because we nearly sold a third of the tickets. And it'll be so much cleaner to say we've already sold a third of the tickets in our flash sale. But the sales open again for that at the end of January. That is for, if you're listening to the Co-working Values podcast, it is for you. There's lots of independent co-working space owners coming to that, and people from local authorities. It will be a very citizen-led, local community, local small biz loving. So get on the wait list there. I'm sure there's something else. Is there anything else, Hector? Is there any thing we should shout out?
I mean, if
The
you're
show
in New
notes.
York, we're going to be doing a bunch of monthly meetups for co-working leaders in New York and the surrounding regions here in Jersey City, in Brooklyn, a little bit upstate as well. So if you are in New York, connect with me on LinkedIn and I'll get you information about joining us for those morning coffees.
I'm glad you mentioned that because that's on my list of things to shout out here. Okay, that's it, folks. Wherever you are in the world, be careful out there. It is a jungle. Say goodbye, Hector.
Bye. Thanks, Bernie.